So, who are you and where did you come from for someone who's never heard of you before?
Well, my name is John-Keating. I'm a filmmaker based out of New York City. I've been working in film and television for the last 20 years. The majority of that has been spent lighting various television shows and films that come through the city here. And in about 2009, me and my buddy, we started a production company and we wanted to focus on video games. We both were gamers, and he has a Magic the Gathering background, and we decided let's combine our loves, filmmaking and gaming, into this nifty little sandwich. And so that's what we've been doing since 2009. It's been fun.
Excellent. What first sparked your interest in filmmaking, and how did you get into it?
Like I think most people, I was scratching my head at like I think I was 22 or 23. Like, what am I going to do with my life? And I was honestly, I was at a store in Dallas, and I looked down at the magazine rack, and there was a magazine about filmmaking, and I was thumbing through it, and in the back they had an ad for the New York Film Academy, which is based here in New York City. It's a fairly popular film school here. It's short. It's not a college. It's a course. And so I was like, okay, well, immediately I was like, wait a minute, this is what I want to do. That's what I was. It was just like a moment where I was like, oh, I want to be a filmmaker. And so, I almost immediately packed bags and signed up and took the course in New York City, and I've been here ever since.
Cool. So prior to working on Game Changers Dreams of BlizzCon, did you have any experience with the world of esports?
Well, I don't know what you would call it, esports. Me and my partner Zach, we produced a film called Race to World First. It was a World of Warcraft documentary, and it was about the top players in the world all competing to be the first guild to kill the bosses in the new expansions that come out. And that's still an ongoing pursuit. It's pretty fascinating, actually. And that's how we got started. We started with that movie. It was a tiny little budget, $18,000 we spent on making that movie, and it blew up. We realized, afterwards, people really needed the content, and I mean, I'm still floored even to this day. It's a very popular movie for anybody that loves World of Warcraft. Anybody that loves gaming culture really likes it. And we ended up winning the Phoenix Comic-Con Film Festival with that one. And it's actually playing for free right now. We're putting it over our Facebook page. But that's that. I don't know if you'd call that esports, but I mean, I guess I would. It's a competition amongst the various guilds, and that's how I learned about StarCraft. To be honest with you, that's how I learned about the esports side of StarCraft, because one of the players in our film referenced. He said something like, his ideal situation would be to be one of these Koreans living in the team houses playing StarCraft all day, and 5 years later, I know that that's not as great as he thought, but certainly that's I had to look that up, and so when I looked it up, I was immediately fascinated with the effect that this game, and here's another Blizzard game, it's just they're disconnected, but I'm like, wow, this is incredible. Look at this one video game changed Korea, and it eventually did a lot more than that. That's what started, and from there I just had this undying commitment to get this movie made, because I was fascinated by the impact that StarCraft had on Korea at the time, and what it was producing there.
That sounds awesome. I'm sure it's probably more than we have time to go over, but what did you learn in the process of making Game Changers? Well,
I think that the reason we're calling it Game Changers Dreams of BlizzCon is that the one common denominator amongst all esports pros was because at this point we've talked to a lot of different games as well. Counter-Strike, I've done a couple of different games as well, Dota and that sort of thing. And in that process, there's the one common denominator is that they all have this dream. They all have this dream, and it's the tenacity with which they focus on that dream, that dictates whether or not they'll be a success, whether they can be a champion. The champions all have this dream, and it's fixated, and they're constantly recreating this dream. They're visualizing themselves on that stage. They're constantly, and there's this adherence to that dream, and it's what motivates them to make the sacrifices necessary to be champions. So, you think in terms of StarCraft, you've got to live in a team house. You've got to, you can't really spend too much time with your friends. You can't spend a lot of time with a girlfriend. There's things that you'll have to sacrifice if you really truly want to play at the top. And so that's not just StarCraft, and really that's not just gaming, but it was that common denominator that motivated us to say, well, okay, let's call this Dreams of BlizzCon, because dreams are such a big, important factor in this world. and we heard it so many times from so many different people, this dream factor. And, the other thing is, as far as learning, I guess I learned, passion, what role passion can have and how powerful that is.
Of course.
The passion that these guys have, and people in the esports, the people, if you look at esports and how it blew up, at this point, we've met all the big players, people like Michal Bleharts over at IEM and George Wu, and the guys that produced that event, and all the folks at ESL, and those guys. The people that produce esports, the people that play in esports, are driven by a passion that is, in 20 years in film and television, working at some of the biggest studios in the world, you don't see that kind of passion. So it's not a surprise to see the success that esports is having, because it's driven by this. It's driven by the people with their boots on the ground have this extreme amount of passion. And it goes, it's the casters, it's the players, it's the people, the producers. Most of the producers, most of the executives in these teams are kids that were players and realized they couldn't do it anymore, and they needed to transition. And they're very bright. Obviously, you've got to be very bright to compete at the highest level in these games. So they get these really highly, they're not traditionally trained, but they're their intellect is very sharp, and they make a lot of really great choices, and they know the world better than anybody else. Just the role that passion can have and how important that is. I think that is something I learned a lot about, is like, you just can never discount that. When you see passion, you know that thing that people are passionate about is going to exist. They're going to make sure it exists. So
yeah. Of course. Well, I think you've already kind of answered this question, but why make an esports movie? And furthermore, why did you choose to do it on StarCraft as opposed to another game?
Okay, so the esports side of it, as far as StarCraft goes, we could have picked we could have picked League of Legends. I had those guys on the phone, and I was thinking about it, and I was, we were pondering that, and there's a big audience and that sort of thing. But when you really look at the scene, and you have to determine what you want story wise, and you want that clean, like you want to make a film that's going to be relevant in 80 years. And the thing about StarCraft is that in 80 years they're going to do some sort of retrospective about esports, and those retrospectives are always, they're going to talk about the games that paved the way, but they're also going to have to come back to StarCraft, because that's where it all starts. And here we are in 2000. At the time it was 2013, and we have the opportunity to talk to these kids that grew up in the PC bangs, and this is a chance to get to the root of it, to talk about, to have that continuity about, here's esports today, and then also where it comes from, and here's the kids that came from the PC bomb. And that they were the champions that we featured. And so I think that's really what it is. Myself and the producers all believed that the story was StarCraft. And we knew that we were giving up a big audience because of that, but we didn't care. I mean, really, for us, it's all about story. Telling a story that's going to matter, and matter the most, and have the most impact. And so we decided, let's do this about StarCraft. And it really wasn't about esports. It was never about esports. It was all about this game that changed Korea, and then esports became the product of that. So It really was about this game, the impact it had, and then obviously we're featuring the esports side of it as well in the film. So the esports side of it was really secondary to us. The interest was really just StarCraft, and wow, look what this game did. And while we were filming in 2013, that was our first shooting schedule at BlizzCon, we started seeing all of these crazy newspaper articles about esports, and suddenly IEM was throwing it, producing events in stadiums all over the world, and it blew up around us. I mean, esports came to the West while we were filming, so it was this remarkable experience. I mean, it was also a validation of what we were doing, because we knew that we knew what we were doing was interesting, but suddenly we had this purpose. Like, we were like, oh, this is the validation of what we were doing. So then the esports side of it became a secondary thing. But then, of course, the whole movie is an esports movie, but it's really a documentary about these two guys. and their lives. I mean, that's really what it is. And in terms of like games, when you look at the different games out there, they all share the same heritage. All these games share the same heritage. Dota's, Counter-Strike, League of Legends. They all trace back to those PC bongs as well. That's where esports as we know it comes from. And the format that we appreciate and enjoy today comes from that. So we can all share that as part of our heritage. And so we also figure, look, if you're really into esports and you want to understand where it all came from and how this all happened, let's do a movie about StarCraft.
Excellent. So it may seem obvious to those that do follow competitive gaming, but why choose Koreans? And would it not have been easier to follow top American players?
Yeah, it would have been easier, like, just to navigate. But it's like, when you think in terms of like long distance runners, right? If you're going to do a story about, the Olympics and long distance running, you got to go to Kenya. You got to, it just doesn't make sense to, you want to see the top pros. And what's amazing about this game, StarCraft, is it's 2 men enter, 1 man leaves kind of mentality. Two guys getting in a booth, and you want to talk and be around the best. And, that's what was compelling to us. And also we felt like there weren't a lot of stories out there about the Koreans. We felt like they had, that story had been missed because it's hard. There aren't a lot of those stories out there. It is difficult. You got to get a translator. Then once the footage comes back, you've got to translate that. So it's a huge step, a huge extra step. But for us, it was like, there's a no-brainer. We're going for the best Koreans, or find a Korean player that wants to work with us.
Given your experience, why do you believe that Koreans typically outperform other nationalities, not just in StarCraft, but in a lot of different competitive video games?
I think that really what you have to look at, and I'm not a scholar in this at all, and I don't think that I have the answer, but I can tell you that if you look at the basics of it, esports blew up there. It started with the PC bong craze, and then esports starts in the PC bong, and the PC bong. In the PC bong, all these kids are going to play StarCraft back in the early 2000s, and this movement where people were going to the PC bongs, and some of these PC, there was a PC bong across the street from there. There were 2 or 3 to the same block. Yeah, and naturally, what happened was in these PC bongs, the best players started to rise to the surface. And so the natural reaction to that is, let's pit our best player against the neighboring PC bong player. And so you've got the birth of esports. And so then it becomes televised and that sort of thing. What happens is then there's this, it becomes such a big deal there that you have this route suddenly, and you can get an esports license, and these teams have formed, and you can join a team at 16. And there's this route that exists. And that's truly, I think, the number one difference between Korea and the rest of the world, is that there's a route. There's a way in. If you're a guy living in Montana and you want to be a pro gamer, you have to do a lot of extra steps that these kids didn't have to do. They had to move to Seoul. They had to get qualify. They had to get their esports license and then join a team, get recruited. But that path doesn't exist. So honestly, I don't think that there's anything. My guess is there's nothing beyond that. I wouldn't want to speculate as to cultural differences, because I'm not trained in that. But based on what I can see, the big advantage there and the big difference that stands out is that there's a path, and that would explain a lot of the, why there's so many, Koreans that are so great at games. Yeah,
it sounds reasonable to me. So you decided to go to Korea. How did you end up with MC and MMA specifically versus the other top Korean pros?
So MC, he's a character, and so that was really an easy choice. We knew he wanted MC right away. When he arrived here in New York City for Red Bull 2012 or 2013, 2012, I think. We went in and we bum rushed. We went backstage. We found his manager Minsik, and we were like, we want to feature him. And Minsik was great, and he opened the doors for us almost immediately. And MC was, he's just the obvious choice for somebody that you're going to focus on. And, you want to have
Yeah.
fun, too, when you make these movies. You don't want to pick somebody that's going to be hard or difficult
Right.
or whatever. And MC's just a fun-loving. He's known as this fun-loving guy, but he's also really, really smart. He's also very generous and kind and all of these things you wouldn't know about him. But and then MMA was really just somebody. We were in Germany and we were featuring Minchel, who was there playing in the World Championship Series in the German in Europe there, and MMA was working with our translator Hoon, and Hoon was managing him for Acer, and so we got to know MMA that way, and we started to really love this guy. And anybody that knows MMA is probably the kindest person I've ever met. Him and his father are two of the kindest people I've ever met. And I was just charmed. I think we were all just charmed by this guy. And we were like, let's turn our cameras on this guy. And that's what we did.
And I think that,
really
without getting into many spoilers, I think that shows through in the film as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he is. I mean, he didn't have to do, and he's the kind of guy, if he sees that you're uncomfortable or he thinks that, you're being put out in any way, he is so concerned about that. And it's not and legitimately concerned. And his dad's the same way. It's a really charming guy. And I'm going to get to see him on Thursday, and we're going to be doing our world premiere at DreamHack Austin. And that's at 8:30 p.m. on Saturday. And they're both going to be there. They are both very happy with the film. And, of course, we're happy about that. And we get to have this reunion, so it's going to be fun.
Yeah, sounds exciting.
Yeah.
So the primary objective for the project, I gathered that it wasn't to cover esports, but I think you were more focused on StarCraft and Korean culture, or was it the other way around?
I think that the primary focus of this was always the story, just finding two stories. Because if you think in terms of the way this could be perceived in 80 years, when they do a retrospective, the best way to explain esports in this time isn't to show, look how big esports is. It's coming there and it's in the stadium. None of that will matter in 80 years or in 20 years or in 10 years. Really, in 5 years, it's going to be just different. So what will matter and what will give you insight into what it was like in this time is to just follow these two stories of these guys making it through a year to try to get to BlizzCon. And it'll give you a depth of understanding, and you'll be able to relate to some of the things that they go through. And that's, I think, the best way to communicate about esports and in a documentary is just tell two stories. And we didn't want to preach and tell anybody what to think and that sort of thing. We don't like documentaries like that. We want to, what we do and when we go out to shoot is we just want to give people access to a world they don't have access to, and then just show it and let them draw their own conclusions. The story ended up being this really charming, sweet story about these two guys that did grow up in PC bangs and used esports to get out of poverty and become world champions. And they have this, and it's that's really what our primary objective was, is let's just tell the story and let them do it. And I got to admit, there were many times where I'm like, wow, look at what's going on here. And, with Intel and it's these huge stadium events. And I was, sometimes like, let's go and feature that and talk about that. And we did a couple times where we shot some interviews, and it just wasn't interesting. The producers were always like, look, just get the stories, follow the stories. That's what matters here. And I'd get back on track, and we would just stay with the stories. And I'm really glad we did.
Excellent. What do you think that people that don't follow StarCraft or competitive gaming will get from watching this movie?
I think a lot of people are scratching their heads. People that are that aren't acquainted with esports. I think the idea of watching people playing video games is odd to a lot of people. I also think there are a lot of parents and concerned parents about their sons or daughters playing too many games or watching too much too many, watching esports too much, whatever. And, what this serves for those people is to understand what's involved. And the other thing is that it's the mainstream, generally, they trivialize what's going on here. They'll trivialize it. And so for us, what was important is to show that this is not just a bunch of kids playing video games. The worst thing you can say to a pro gamer, the very worst, and this is another, very a common denominator, is to tell them how lucky they are that they get to play a video game for a living, because that trivializes what they do. This is not it's work. It's an incredible amount of work. It's an incredible amount of sacrifice. And to say something like you get to play video games for a living, it just they'll turn you right off. That'll turn any pro gamer right off. Don't tell them that, because what you're not getting out of that is that this involves a huge amount of sacrifice. And but to understand, like, for the people out there that are wondering about their kid and that sort of thing, a movie like this could help them understand, what's going on, why this is compelling, what's so interesting about this thing that they're following and they're doing. And, in our World of Warcraft doc, a lot of people got back to us telling us that they showed the movie to their parents and family so that they would understand why they played the game and that sort of thing. And I can imagine that that's something that people could do here. And again, like years from now, people will need to reflect on this. They're going to want to know about this stuff, and we're going to have a movie that, I'd like to think that they would use as a reference.
Yeah, that sounds great. So tell me about BlizzCon, and what would you tell someone who's never been to BlizzCon before?
BlizzCon is everything that everybody ever says about it. It is, you get there and you are with people, you are surrounded by people that are excited and charged and happy and about what you are. And so suddenly you have this immense amount of people that all share the same reality, that all see things the same way and are excited about the same things. And you're not used to that in your day-to-day life. You're not used to being surrounded by people cheering about your game or cheering about or wearing cosplay, doing the cosplay or the games and just meeting with your guilds or your friends that you know online. I mean, that I asked a kid outside of BlizzCon. I said, what's the next step in the world of gaming? And he turned around and he pointed. He said, "This is the next step. I'm here meeting with friends that I play online with, and we're having the best time of our life." And so that really, to me, that does make a lot of sense. Like, you get to come and hang out with these guys you only know online, and those of us that have played a lot of games online know that some of the best laughs we've had in our lives have been in Ventrilo or voice chat or in game. So, being able to talk to those people face to face is like, it's a dream come true. I suggest everybody that wants to go to BlizzCon figure it out. I've been to 6 now. I've always been working, though. I've never been to one where I get to just sit back and enjoy it.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Is there anything else you wanted to mention or shout out?
Let's see. So, the thing that I really want people to know that are in the community, for example, is the movie is going to, we're going to have iTunes is doing a, what's it called? Like a pre-release or a pre-purchase program. And, anybody that's in the community can get the movie for $5.99 as opposed to $9.99, which I really want the community to take advantage of that. The community was a big part of helping us make this, so I would prefer that the community gets a discount. So the more people that know about that discount, the better from my point of view. And that actually starts. You can pre-purchase the film starting the 2nd. We're going to have our event on a world premiere at 8:30 on DreamHack. We're looking forward to that, and we're hoping as many people can attend. And then on June 12th is when it comes out on iTunes, Vudu, Google Play, Prime Video. So everybody will be able to access it that way. And so that's pretty much it for us. And I hope we see some of you guys at DreamHack. It's a Lair Friday, right?
Yes, this will.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, certainly anybody that's listening that's going to be a DreamHack can mention they heard us on the show.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Absolutely, it was fun.